me go!
They call it the land of dreams. Yet for countless Americans, life feels more like a nightmare. Gleaming skyscrapers rise above streets where tents and cardboard shelters multiply. Billion-dollar tech firms thrive a few miles away from families sleeping in cars. Politicians speak proudly of prosperity, while veterans beg for change at intersections. This contradiction strikes at the very core of America's identity. Greatness for some, struggle for many. To truly understand what the nation has become, we must pull back the curtain on homelessness and confront the illusion head-on. The question is no longer whether we see this crisis, it's how much longer we are willing to accept it. For generations, the United States has been celebrated as the land of opportunity, where hard work and ambition are believed to guarantee stability and prosperity. From the towering skylines of New York City to the gleaming boulevards of Los Angeles, the image of America has been carefully curated for the world, a place where dreams are realized, fortunes are made, and progress seems boundless. This vision of the American dream is not just a national myth. It has been marketed globally as evidence of American greatness, a promise that anyone, regardless of origin, can thrive here. Yet beneath these bright lights and steel towers lies another America, one that many would prefer not to see. Under freeway overpasses, in the shadows of skyscrapers, and in the quiet corners of suburban parks, tents and makeshift shelters remind us of a harsher reality.
I mean, you put your tent up, and in the daytime, nighttime, the police come and tell you to take it down. Sometimes they come and take the stuff, and don't leave it parked on the sidewalk in public spot, because they'll definitely put it in the trash at the time.
Families huddle together in cars that have become their last refuge. Veterans, once hailed as heroes, find themselves sleeping on the streets they once defended. For every story of triumph and upward mobility, there is another of struggle, dislocation, and despair. It is in these contradictions that the illusion begins to crumble. The uncomfortable truth is that prosperity in the United States has never been equally shared. While the nation boasts some of the wealthiest individuals on the planet and a consumer culture that floods the world with symbols of success, millions of Americans live without a roof over their heads. It is not simply an accident of fate or a result of poor personal choices. Instead, it is a reflection of systemic failures. Failures in housing policy, healthcare, wages, and social safety nets that have allowed this crisis to deepen for decades. How can a society claim greatness when it leaves so many of its citizens outside in the cold? To understand the scale of this contradiction, one need only look at the numbers. On any given night, more than 500,000 people experience homelessness in the United States. In some cities, entire blocks are lined with tents, creating encampments that have become semi-permanent fixtures of the urban landscape. These are not isolated tragedies.
The rent is too high. It's even going up in even these rooming houses. And, you know, people are using drugs to escape, and the drug use is making you come out here more. You don't pay your rent, you're not working enough, and that's part of, you know, contributing to the problem.
They are reminders that beneath the shining surface of the American dream, there exists a struggle for survival that millions cannot escape. And that struggle is not confined to those on the margins. it is increasingly touching working families, veterans, and even the elderly. The illusion of the American dream depends on the assumption that opportunity is available to all. But the existence of widespread homelessness undermines that very promise. If the foundation of a dream is stability and security, then how do we reconcile the sight of children doing homework by flashlight in a car, or parents lining up at food banks after working full-time jobs? To truly unpack homelessness in America, we must first confront this duality, the carefully polished narrative of success and the overlooked reality of suffering that exists right beside it. When most Americans hear the word homeless, a familiar image comes to mind, a solitary man with a cardboard sign asking for change at a busy intersection. This picture has shaped public imagination for decades, but it is no longer the truth, if it ever was. Homelessness in America has grown far more complex, and its face today is as diverse as the nation itself.
Livable again, it's time to move again. They have made it impossible to feel human just because we're homeless. Like, we're not supposed to exist. We get a ticket just for trying to live.
Families with children are now among the fastest growing groups. Nearly 1/3 of the homeless population are families, often led by single mothers juggling low-paying jobs and impossible choices. In countless parking lots across the country, families sleep in cars that have become both shelter and prison. I once heard of a mother in Phoenix, Maria, who works 2 jobs yet still cannot afford rent. Each evening, she parks behind a supermarket where her 2 children do their homework by flashlight in the back seat. Maria locks the doors, hoping the night passes quietly, all while whispering prayers that her children will someday know the stability she cannot give them now. Veterans, too, embody this crisis. These are men and women who serve with honor, carrying the burdens of war only to return home to silence, trauma, and neglect. Too often, post-traumatic stress and chronic injuries collide with a healthcare system that cannot keep pace. John, a Vietnam veteran I once met in Chicago, carried his medals in a small tin box, but had no place to call home. He spoke quietly of nights when he felt safer in a jungle halfway across the world than in the alleys where he now slept. To see a man once saluted, now ignored beneath an overpass, is to witness the failure of a nation's promise. Equally troubling is the rise of the working homeless. These are people who punch the clock, sometimes at more than one job, yet still cannot afford a roof. In many cities, rent consumes more than half of a paycheck, leaving little for food, medicine, or transportation. A broken transmission, a medical bill, or even a missed shift can mean eviction. And once displaced, the climb back to stability becomes nearly impossible. Without a permanent address, finding new work is harder. Without work, housing is out of reach. This unseen crisis is not about outdated stereotypes. It is about children who deserve safety, veterans who deserve dignity, and workers who deserve wages that match the cost of survival. Homelessness in America is not a single face or a single story. It is millions of them. And together, they remind us that the problem is far deeper and far closer than many are willing to admit. Homelessness in America is not the result of chance, nor can it be explained away as individual weakness. It is the product of decades of economic, political, and social decisions that have gradually stripped millions of people of their footing. Behind every tent and every shelter bed lies a story of wages that never kept pace with rising costs, rents that climbed too high, medical bills that crushed savings, and addictions that filled the void left by broken systems. Among these forces, the spread of fentanyl and methamphetamine has turned what began as a housing crisis into something far more devastating, a storm that consumes not only homes, but lives. At its core, housing remains the first wound. Over the past 4 decades, rents have surged while affordable units have vanished. What was once the bedrock of American life, an affordable home, has been transformed into a commodity for speculation. In city after city, median rents exceed the income of average workers, leaving even those with steady jobs unable to secure a roof over their heads. Families who once managed to get by now find themselves forced into cars, motels, or overcrowded shelters. Housing, instead of being a right of citizenship, has become a privilege reserved for the wealthy. Yet for those already pushed to the margins, another force drives the crisis deeper. Fentanyl, potent and cheap, has spread with terrifying speed, often mixed into other drugs without users knowing. It has fueled an epidemic of overdoses that kills tens of thousands each year. Methamphetamine, with its corrosive grip on body and mind, destroys judgment, employability, and health, trapping individuals in cycles they cannot escape. For many already living on the edge of eviction or job loss, addiction becomes the final push onto the streets. Once there, these substances become a brutal coping mechanism. Fentanyl to quiet the despair, meth to survive long nights without safety or warmth. But what eases suffering for a moment also tightens the chains of homelessness, making escape even harder. These personal struggles unfold against a backdrop of systemic neglect. For decades, mental health services have been gutted, leaving few options for those battling addiction. Detox centers are scarce, treatment programs have endless waiting lists, and too often, the only response is a jail cell. The closure of psychiatric hospitals in the 1,980 seconds, without adequate community care to replace them, left thousands untreated. Later crises deepened the wound. The housing collapse of 2008 forced families into foreclosure, and the COVID-19 pandemic swept away jobs and stability, leaving many already burdened by addiction further adrift. Healthcare costs worsen the spiral. A sudden illness, compounded by the weight of addiction, can bankrupt a family overnight. Medical debt remains a leading cause of financial ruin in the United States. And for those without savings, eviction follows swiftly. Once stability is lost, the path back is steep, and many never make it. The roots of this crisis are tangled together: soaring housing costs, stagnant wages, collapsing healthcare, and the deadly spread of fentanyl and meth. Together, they form a perfect storm that sweeps people from stability into the streets. And so, a hard question remains: if the richest nation on earth cannot confront both the broken economics and the drug epidemics destroying its people, what kind of future will it leave for the generations yet to come? Homelessness isn't just a human tragedy, it's a drain on the economy. When thousands in a city have no place to live, the fallout affects everyone. Emergency rooms turn into default clinics for those without insurance or regular doctors, driving up costs and overwhelming hospitals that are already stretched thin. Untreated chronic illnesses fester, small injuries spiral into larger ones, and mental health issues worsen. This doesn't just harm the homeless, it means higher healthcare costs for all of us, paid through taxes or insurance premiums. Police and first responders also bear the burden. Officers spend hours dealing with encampment disputes, overdoses, or welfare checks, time that could be used addressing other crimes. Fire departments scramble to put out blazes in makeshift shelters or abandoned buildings, sometimes with deadly consequences. The justice system is no better locking up people whose only crime is sleeping on a park bench. It's not only unfair, it's a money pit. Local businesses suffer as well. Encampments near shops or restaurants scare off customers, tanking revenue. Homeowners or small investors like me watch property values dip when tent cities pop up nearby. It's not just a matter of optics, it's a real blow to our wallets and neighborhoods. On a larger scale, homelessness kills productivity. Someone without a stable home can't hold down a job, pay taxes, or contribute to the economy. They're stuck in survival mode, scraping for the next meal or a safe place to sleep. When a chunk of a city's population is sidelined from work, school, or stable housing, the entire system suffers. Children in homeless families miss school or fall behind, setting them up for a lifetime of struggle. That's not just a tragedy, it's an economic disaster waiting to happen. It's a vicious cycle. No home leads to no job leads to deeper poverty, poverty leads to homelessness, and homelessness makes work nearly impossible. Stability is the only way out, but it's the hardest thing to obtain. Experts aren't wrong. Homelessness doesn't just stem from poverty, it fuels it. So, what does it say about a country this rich when we allow this costly neglect to fester? For decades, the response to homelessness in America has often been inadequate at best and harmful at worst. Too many cities have relied on measures that criminalize homelessness, issuing fines for sleeping outdoors, banning encampments, or conducting sweeps that destroy people's belongings. These approaches may temporarily move the problem out of sight, but they do nothing to address its root causes. In fact, they often make recovery harder by saddling individuals with fines or criminal records that limit their chances of finding employment or housing. Shelters, another common solution, provide temporary relief but rarely stability. Overcrowded, unsafe, and underfunded, they can leave people more vulnerable than before. Many avoid them altogether, fearing theft, violence, or separation from family members. Superficial fixes, such as quick cleanup operations before major public events, serve political optics but leave the structural issues untouched. Yet, there are models of hope. The Housing First approach, pioneered in places like Utah and later adopted internationally, provides permanent housing as the first step rather than the last. Instead of demanding sobriety or employment before offering shelter, Housing First recognizes that stability must come first. Once housed, individuals are more likely to engage in treatment, education, and work programs. In Finland, this approach has nearly eliminated chronic homelessness. In Salt Lake City, it reduced veteran homelessness by over 90%. These successes prove that with the right priorities, progress is possible. Community-led initiatives have also shown promise. Small villages of tiny homes, created through partnerships between nonprofits, volunteers, and local governments have offered dignity and stability for those in need. Churches, advocacy groups, and grassroots organizations have stepped in where governments have failed, creating food programs, mobile health clinics, and outreach teams that build trust. These efforts remind us that compassion and innovation can coexist, and that local action can succeed even when national policy falters. Still, lasting change requires more than piecemeal solutions. What America needs is a comprehensive national strategy that treats housing as a right, not a privilege. This means large-scale investments in affordable housing, stronger tenant protections, expanded access to healthcare and mental health services, and wage policies that ensure full-time workers can afford basic needs. Without this, the cycle will continue. The choice is clear: maintain the illusion with temporary fixes, or embrace the difficult work of structural reform. Which path reflects the kind of nation we aspire to be? The homelessness crisis is both a moral and an economic imperative. To ignore it is to accept that millions will remain excluded from the promise of the American dream. To address it is to reaffirm the values of compassion, equality, and justice that the nation claims to hold dear. There is no shortage of reasons to act now. Economically, the cost of maintaining the status quo is staggering. Studies show that it is often cheaper to provide stable housing than to continually rely on emergency services, shelters, and policing. Morally, the cost of inaction is even greater. A society that tolerates suffering on this scale risks losing its humanity. A nation cannot call itself great if its greatness is built on leaving its most vulnerable behind. Individual citizens, too, have a role to play. Advocacy matters. Voting for leaders who prioritize real solutions, not quick fixes, is essential. Supporting local organizations, volunteering time, or donating resources can make tangible differences in lives. Beyond charity, it is about shaping a society that refuses to look away, that demands accountability from those in power. To reimagine the American dream, we must redefine it, not as a myth of wealth accessible only to the lucky, but as a shared foundation of stability, dignity, and opportunity for all. This requires dismantling the illusion that prosperity for a few is enough, and replacing it with a vision that recognizes housing as a fundamental human right. Only then can we claim that the dream is alive, not just for some, but for every American. And so, the question remains, what future will we choose? Will we continue to hide the crisis, treating tents and encampments as inconveniences to be swept aside? Or will we confront the truth, demand systemic change, and honor the belief that every citizen deserves shelter and security? The answer to this question will define not only the fate of the homeless in America, but the very character of the nation itself. Conclusion. In the end, the homelessness crisis is not simply about statistics or policies. It is about people, families, veterans, children, and workers whose struggles expose the cracks in America's foundation. To call this nation great while so many sleep on its streets is to live within an illusion. Breaking that illusion requires courage, compassion, and a collective will to act. Homelessness in America should never be seen as an acceptable reality. A truly great nation must build a future where every citizen has a place to call home, and where the American dream belongs to all, not just the fortunate few,